In this video, I'm going to show you how to crochet this very simple granny stitch style bandana. Before I get started, I'd like to point out that this is a made to measure pattern. And what that means is that there is no specific gauge that is used. You can use whatever yarn and hook combination that you prefer. You will need to take one measurement. You're going to need to measure the circumference of the head of either yourself or whoever you're making the bandana for. And you can use a flexible measuring tape like this one. You can find them in the sewing department of craft stores. If you don't have a flexible tape measure, you can also use a piece of yarn and wrap it around your head to determine your head size, and then mark it and then lay it out flat and measure it with a ruler. You're then going to take the head size and minus about 1 to 2 inches from it. So for example, I'm making this for a 22-inch head. So I want the base across the bottom to equal 20 inches. And the reason for this is that your bandana will stretch, and you will also be using the ties to make up for any space in between the size of the head and the bandana. So write down the size of the head circumference and then take off 1 to 2 inches. That is the width that you want your final bandana bottom measurement to be. For materials, I am using a sport weight yarn. I prefer to use a lighter weight yarn like either a sport or DK weight yarn. However, since this is a made to measure pattern, you can use a worsted or whatever yarn and hook combination that you prefer. I'm also using a 5mm hook. I have a pair of scissors and a tapestry needle to weave in my ends. Let's get started. To begin, I'm going to start with a slip knot. So I just wrap the yarn around my finger and then reach in and pull that loop up. And then I'm just going to put that loop on my hook and cinch it down. And now I'm going to start with row 1. I'm going to begin with a chain 4. And I'm going to be working in that very first chain. The first 3 chains counts as a double crochet, and I'm using US terms for this tutorial. So now I need to make 2 more double crochets. So I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to insert my hook in that very first chain. Yarn over and pull through, and I have 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's 1 double crochet. I'm going to make 1 more, insert into that first chain, grab the yarn and pull it through, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 3, yarn over, pull through 3. So I've made 1 of these little granny clusters, I like to call them. Now I'm going to chain 2 for the center of my bandana. And now I'm going to make another granny cluster on the other side, still working in that very first chain. I'm going to make 3 double crochets. So yarn over, insert in that chain, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on the hook, pull through 2, pull through 2. I'm going to do that 2 more times. Pull through 2, pull through 2. So if you've ever made a granny square, this is kind of like a half of a granny square. So we have our 3 double crochets on one side with a chain 2 space in the center and 3 double crochets on the other side. So it makes this little triangle to begin with. And that is the end of row 1. For row 2, I'm going to flip my work over, and now I'm going to chain 3. This chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. And I need to make another granny cluster. I'm going to be putting it into this very first double crochet that we just chained out of. So I'm going to put 2 more double crochets in that same stitch. So there's 1, and 2. And now I'm going to be working in this center space that we created with our 2 chains. I'm going to create another granny cluster, so I'm going to yarn over and place 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 2 chains to create our center again, and then 3 more double crochets. So that's going to be a repeat that we're going to do every single time when we get to that chain 2 space. You're going to place 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and 3 double crochets. And now I'm going to skip over the next 2 stitches, and I'm going to be putting my last set of double crochets in this very last stitch, which happens to be our chain stitch from the first row. So we're going to work right into the top of that chain 3 space and place 3 more double crochets. So we're creating our little triangle. Okay. Now if you flip it over, you can see where we have another set of 3 double crochets, our 3 double crochets with a chain 2 in the center, another 3 double crochets, and then 3 double crochets on the end, and that is the end of row 2. For row 3, once again, I'm going to flip my work over and I'm going to chain 3. That counts again as our first double crochet. And just like in row 2, I'm going to be placing 2 double crochets in that very first stitch, going underneath both loops there. Placing another one of these granny clusters. And now I'm going to be working in this space in between the 2 granny clusters from the row below. So if you kind of pull your work apart a little bit, you can see that there's this space right here. I'm going to place another 3 double crochets. I'm going to show that up close again here. Just working right in between those clusters. I'm going to grab my yarn and pull it through for another set of 3 double crochets. And now I'm going to skip over my next set of double crochet clusters, and I've come to the center space again where I have my chain 2. And once again, I'm going to put 3 double crochets, chain 2 to make our center, and 3 more double crochets. And now I'm going to do what I did on this side in reverse. I'm skipping over those first 3 double crochets that create that little cluster, and I'm going to work in the space in between them. Working 3 more double crochets. And just like I did in row 2, I'm going to be placing 3 double crochets in that very last stitch, which happens to be our chain 3 from the row below. So I'm going to yarn over and insert in the top of that chain 3 and make my last 3 double crochets. And that is the end of row 3. Row 4 is going to be our repeat row, so that means you're going to repeat this step every single row until you reach the width of the bottom of your bandana. So once again, I'm going to flip my work over and I'm going to chain 3. That counts as my first double crochet again. And just like the previous rows, I'm going to place 2 double crochets in that very first stitch. Then I'm going to skip over this first set of double crochets. And then before I reach my second set, I have that little space that we created. I'm going to place another set of 3 double crochets, or what I like to call a granny cluster. And I'm going to repeat that until I get to my center space. So I have another set here, so I'm going to skip over those and work again in that space in between. And now I've come to my center space, because when I skip over these, I've reached my chain 2. And in the chain 2, just like before, we're going to put 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and 3 double crochets. So there's my 3, chain 2, and then the other half. Now we're going to be working kind of downhill from our little peak from our triangle and repeating the same thing on the other side. I'm going to skip over my first cluster here till I reach my space in between. I'm going to place 3 double crochets. Skip over the next 3. Place 3 double crochets in that space in between. And when I reach my last set of double crochets, my little granny cluster here, I'm going to look for that chain 3 and put 3 double crochets again in the top of that chain 3. So you'll always begin your row with 3 double crochets and end your row with 3 double crochets. You're going to place those 3 double crochet clusters in between the clusters from the previous row, and in the center you're always going to place 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. So I'm going to continue to work off camera until the base of my bandana, when measured across from point to point, is the desired size that I need. And I'll meet you back here when I get to that spot. So now I have finished my final row for my bandana. I ended up with about 16 rows altogether. This gave me a final measurement from one end of my bandana to the other end, about 20 inches. Another thing that I did while I was off camera was I wove in the end from our original slip knot and tail, because after we make our first tie, we will be working across the top of our bandana until we get to the other side to make our other tie. Now I'm going to show you how to make the ties for your bandana. And once again, the tie length is going to be a personal preference. I like to shoot for about 9 inches on the length of my ties. I feel like 9 inches is kind of the minimum amount that you need to be able to tie your bandana comfortably, that you have enough room and enough length in the tie to be able to do it. However, depending on your style choice, if you want it to be a little bit longer, if you want to add some like beads or some pom-poms onto the end of your ties, you may want to make your length a little bit longer. So starting where I left off, I'm just going to chain my length to be about 9 inches. And for me, this is 40. So I'm just going to chain 40 chains. I'm probably going to continue to do this off camera, or chain the length of the tie that you wish to have. And I'll meet you back here after you have made all of your chains. Now I've just made my last chain. This is chain number 40, and then I'm just going to add one more to be used as my turning chain. And now I'm going to slip stitch back across each of those chains until I get back to the beginning of where I started with my chains. So starting from the second chain from the hook, I'm just going to insert my hook, yarn over, pull through the first loop, and then pull through the second loop to make a slip stitch. Insert into the next chain, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through that next one. I like the slip stitches because it creates kind of a little bit of a nice sturdy tie. You can also use a single crochet if you want your ties to be just a little bit thicker. So I'm going to continue to work off camera. If you'd like to pause the video, I'm going to be just slip stitching in each of these chains until I reach back at the base of my bandana and finish right here. And now I've come to my very last chain stitch here. I'm going to make my final slip stitch. And now my first tie is complete. And now I'm going to work across the base of the bandana along the top here until we reach the other corner. And this is where I'm going to make my other tie. Now I like to put single crochets along the top. However, you can choose whatever type of stitch that you prefer. And since I made double crochets along each of the rows, I'm going to place 2 single crochets per every row. So for each row, I'm going to come along and do a single crochet, and then another single crochet. And that's for my first row. I'm going to skip down again to my second row here, and I'm going to place 2 single crochets in that row. You can place them wherever you prefer. So 2 single crochets in this row as well. And like I said, you can use half doubles or doubles, or you can just continue to slip stitch if you prefer to slip stitch across the top too. So I'm going to keep working along the top here, adding my single crochets, placing 2 single crochets per row until I reach the other side of my bandana. So if you'd like to pause the video, I will meet you back here when you finish your stitches along the top. I'm just placing my last single crochet into the base of the bandana. You can see it just gives it a nice even finish along the top. Now I'm going to finish my other tie. So I'm going to mirror what I did on the other side. I'm just going to chain 40 and then add that extra turning chain for 41. So I'm going to continue to chain off camera if you'd like to pause the video and work the chain stitches for the tie on the other side, and I'll meet you back here when that's finished. Here's my final slip stitch. I've reached the end, and now I'm just going to slip stitch into one of the stitches in the actual bandana itself just to secure it. And now I'm ready to fasten off. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to leave about a 6-inch tail. I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull that yarn through so it makes a nice sturdy little knot. And then I'll just weave my ends in. So to weave in my ends, you can just kind of pick a place where you'd like to weave your ends in. I just like to work kind of across the top of the bandana here. I'm going to go underneath a few stitches and pull through. And then I like to kind of work back. I like to work back and forth about 3 times total, working underneath different stitches each time. I'm going to make my last pass here. And then I like to give it a good stretch to make sure that it's not going to pop out. And just simply cut really close. So that is our finished bandana. Now here is our finished bandana. I'm just going to fold in these ends here. And I just like to tie these like I would tying a shoe. You can see that that just gives it a nice little small tie that's super, super cute. Thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and send it to all of your crafty friends. And be sure to subscribe to my channel for more crochet tutorials.